Welcome back. Well, ahead of his maiden budget tomorrow, Finance Minister Arun Jaitley tabled the economic survey in Parliament today, which says that tough measures are needed to shore up public finances and reduce inflation. The survey says, among other things, that the fiscal situation of the central government is much worse than it appears. There's a need for subsidy reforms for fiscal consolidation, calling for the rationalization of subsidies such as fertilizer and food. That GDP growth will be better this year at 5.4 to 5.9%, overcoming the below 5% mark that has hurt the economy for the last couple of years. Also, inflation is expected to moderate by the end of the year. But the report warns of a downward risk to economic growth because of a bad monsoon and other external factors. Well, the Aam Aadmi that's been promised Achhe Din by the NDA government has many expectations from this budget tomorrow.
कि बजट जो हो उसमें जो मिडिल क्लास फैमिली है उसके लिए कुछ करना चाहिए.
The vegetable prices are increasing day by day. I don't think so even this government is going to stick around for a long time, because the kind of expectations which we had with the BJP, they're not meeting to that expectations.
I say that this mandate they should use it to reform the Indian economy as such, even if it means that taking tough steps like price hikes and anti-socialist measures.
A couple of areas would be infrastructure and withdrawal of retrospective tax.
They should invest at least 6% of the GDP into the education sector, given that a large population of India, their youth.
Actually, this is BJP's first budget. People are expecting a change, but this railway budget, everything is came. Petrol price is increasing, so I don't know.
I don't think we should expect something dramatic, but there would be certainly an element of progressive change.
चीज़ें इतनी महंगी हो गई हैं, ग्रॉसरीज की दाम कम होनी चाहिए, फ्रूट्स की दाम कम होने चाहिए, इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर डेवलप होना चाहिए.
Well, the question is whether the government is going to be able to live up to the expectations that everyone has from this budget. I don't think you can ever have a budget that's going to please everyone all the time. Joining us here in the studio, former Law Minister and Member of Parliament Ashwini Kumar. Siddharth Birla, the President of FICCI, joins us as well, as does D. Raja, Rajya Sabha MP of the CPI. Let me ask Mr. Ashwini Kumar first that, you know, the Congress, which was actually in a sense the party that initiated economic reforms, you had tried to move reform measures like multi-brand retail, FDI and so on. How would you then look at the Modi government's push for reforms, especially in this budget? Would you support it or will you speak against it?
Well, I think to the extent that they carry forward our policies that we have initiated, we will certainly support them. To the extent that they act in larger national interests, we will certainly support them. And I think coming to the question of the economic survey, it is more or less a realistic picture of the state of the economy. And I personally believe that Mr. Modi will have to build on what we have established. And there's nothing wrong in doing that. There's, after all, some degree of continuity in economic policy. And we certainly hope that the essentials of the economic policy that we had initiated would not be compromised merely because it was done by us. I hope he doesn't do that. But the recent signs that we are seeing are not very conducive to a cooperative attitude as far as key elements in the economic policy is concerned. Take, for example, their opposition to the retail trade, which was there even earlier, and I concede that. But I think there was a very strong opinion in favor of opening up multi-brand retail trade. But since they've taken an ideological position on this, I have nothing to say. But whether or not the policy initiatives that they have in mind would be in the overall interest of the nation or not is yet to be seen. The budget would reflect that. The issue of retrospective taxation is an issue that is coming up time and again. We will know the exact position only after tomorrow when the budget is unfurled, and then we'll take a position on it.
Well, Siddharth Birla, what does industry expect? What would you say, in your view, is your assessment of the Modi government until now? Many have said until today that there seems to be a mixed message coming from them as far as reforms are concerned. Of course, the big test is tomorrow when the budget is unveiled. Is that your sense as well, or do you really think that he will literally bite the bullet on reforms now?
Okay, Nidhi, on the expectations, I think industry and business really had its feet on the ground, and we did not run away with the expectations as some of the market seems to have done, and some parts of the population also have very, very high expectations. So one of our earliest suggestions was that expectations need to be moderated and in line with reality. So certainly I think from a business point of view, we do not walk into the budget or the economic survey of today with very high expectations, except the expectations are not on the numbers, how the numbers will be delivered, because we know there are challenges as far as numbers are concerned. We are not asking for anything, and I believe that the finance minister knows that he cannot pull in anything also because the business in India is not doing very well. But at the same time, this is an ideal chance or the correct time to lay down the roadmap for the next 3 to 5 years as to how do we take the economy forward. How do we control inflation? How do we provide employment? How do we rekindle investments? These are the key signals that are going to be coming out tomorrow. I think the economic survey today, being slightly on the subdued side, including providing conservative numbers because of all the risk factors, and therefore saying that growth could be as low as 5.4%, has already set the tone for managing expectations. If you heard many of the people who you interviewed before your program, and I was just listening to them, I think the biggest expectation that can be met for the common man, right down to the last common denominator, is if we are able to moderate inflation. If we are able to moderate food inflation particularly, because we can't do much about imported inflation of fuel pricing and other things. So I think that would be the single biggest impact that this government can make.
Okay, so you're talking about managing expectations. Mr. D. Raja, what then are the left's expectations? Because you have an ideologically very different position. And in your assessment until now, has this new government been very different from the UPA or not?
I do not think so. If you go by railway budget, if you go by economic survey, there is going to be a slew of harsh measures which can burden the common people, the toiling people further. Congress wants BJP to continue its policies. BJP is also willing to carry forward those policies, but with a difference, with more aggression, with more pro-corporate and pro-business policies. In fact, the industries are giving pressure on Mr. Modi government. It's a new government, 1 month old government. We have been saying these policies are responsible for such an economic crisis in the country, for high price rise and inflation, particularly food inflation. These policies need to be reviewed and course correction will have to be done. But I do not think Mr. Arun Jaitley can do such things. In fact, what is budget after all? Budget is two parts. One, government should tell the people how it is going to generate revenue, mobilize resources. On the other hand, how the government is going to spend, what are its priorities, what spending will be there on social sector or on physical infrastructure. But I do not think this government is having courage to touch the corporate sector, to tap the resources for revenue generation. But on the other hand, there are indications that government will cut down all spending on social sector and other welfare schemes. That is going to cause concerns for the toiling people and the poor people. And again the question of subsidy is raised. Even you raised the question of subsidy, as though subsidy is some kind of philanthropical action done towards common people or toiling people. In fact, the people do not get their real wages, they do not get their fair share in the country's wealth, and subsidy is one way of compensating that. And let us not market the toiling people or
I was only reading out to you what the survey said, sir. I was only telling you that the economic survey is talking about the need for subsidy reform, and you raised an important point about
I do not agree. I do not agree with that approach. That's what I am saying.
And which is why I want to come to the BJP on that, that in fact one of the things that this survey seems to indicate, as Mr. Raja said, is looking at these social sector schemes again. For example, maybe Manrega, the food bill and so on. Is that what the party feels is the best approach to cut down?
See, I think no one can preempt what the budget has within the ambit, and only tomorrow will say what the budget has. But few points need quick mention. First and foremost, if you look at the statistics of subsidies, Back in 1980s, it occupied almost 0.98% of the GDP, and presently it has jumped to 2.50% of the GDP. So ironically, it speaks that the percentage of poor, going by the definition of what Mr. D. Raja was saying, percentage of poor in India is considerably increasing over the time. Then I believe for the large span of time, Indian governance was sleeping. That from 0.98% we jumped to 2.50%. Secondly, what even the economic survey says, and what Mr. Arun Jaitley previously said, that mindless populism has to be reined in. I mean, in the sense that there is a need for rationalizing the subsidies. We are not saying that Manrega has to be done away with, or the food security bill is not to be acted with. But if you go through one of the articles about 2 days ago in Indian Express, fantastically it's concluding, the concluding paragraph was pointing towards a fact that if you send rupee 6 for the lowest denominator as food subsidy, then rupee 1 reaches the one poorest at the lowest ground of pyramid. So 5 rupees lost.
Restructuring of populist,
5 rupees
what are
lost.
called populist
And this,
schemes.
I mean, even if it was 2:1 ratio, it would have been mindless. 6:1 is almost mind to the
Okay, let me get Mr. Ashwini Kumaran on this, because it is
this
the Congress.
needs reforming.
There is the Congress that gets the blame, and the NAC that gets the blame for overburdening the economy with the food bill, you know, the Manrega, and you know, all the social sector schemes. And you know, how do you respond then to this possibility of a restructuring?
I'm very happy that you've asked me this question, because I think this needed to be brought into the debate. The economic survey itself talks about 5 critical parameters. It is the UPA government that reined in current account deficit and the fiscal deficit. Despite the gravest of international economic crisis, we could keep it at 4.8% in 2012-13. Foreign exchange reserves at 304.2 billion are at an all-time high. 100 million people, both according to Rangarajan Committee and the Planning Commission, have been lifted above the poverty line. The vastest expansion of the social empowerment programs.
Actually, the number of poor turns out to be much more than was previously
because
thought.
of the population. Because of the population.
What the Planning Commission said and what the Rangarajan Committee say are very different things.
The Tendulkar line and the Rangarajan, because I was involved in that, so I know about it. The Tendulkar line and the Rangarajan line, whichever way you look at it, one fact remains the same. Despite the percentages from 32.7% to 21%, it has been reduced. That is what the economic survey states. Therefore, the fact remains that all that has been done by the UPA in the last 10 years does provide the edifice on which they have an opportunity to build. But if they are going to go in an endless blame game, that nothing was happening in the last 10 or 20 years is wholly wrong. We have taken a principle.
While the social sector schemes are important, and obviously this country needs them, you need a food bill. The criticism of the food bill at that time was, why should it cover 67% of the population when 67% of the population doesn't need food subsidies? So have the structures gone wrong somewhere?
No, that was a debatable point, whether 67% need it or 57% needs it or 74% needs it. I think there was a median line there, and that is based upon the formulae which was devised in consultation with all the experts, building upon the then Tendulkar line, but thereafter the Ministry of Rural Development had gone in for surveys on certain parameters, and the experts felt that this was the right line. Now, that's a debatable point. It could have been higher, it could have been a little lower. The fact remains that the...
You're saying don't dilute it. You're saying don't dilute
we are saying rationalize it if you can. We set about rationalizing it. There were 100 and some odd 85 schemes run by the Planning Commission. We brought it down to 72. We are not against rationalization. But if in the name of rationalization you are going to roll back those measures which are critical for social and economic empowerment of the underprivileged, we will certainly oppose it.
Can I give an example of a way of rationalization?
Yeah, I just want to, and then I'll come to Siddharth Beta.
Exactly. An example would be Manrega.
Yeah,
Mr. Raja, just a second. As far as Manrega, we were talking of food scheme. Let's come back to Manrega. In Manrega, I believe a letter was written by our Rajasthan Chief Minister recently, and the 2 points she mentions really needs to be mentioned over here as well, that at the end of the day, Manrega has to create durable assets and it has to give you a sustainable livelihood. So if we see to it that the implementation of Manrega is such that these two ends are met, I believe that's what is called as rationalization, which was probably not happening in the previous regime. It's not a blame game. It's only the fact that rationalization of the reforms of the subsidies is a very essential part.
We started the rationalization process, and you learn in the process all the time.
Okay, Mr. Raja, yes.
No, firstly, I do not agree with the talk of mindless populism. I don't know. They want to ridicule themselves because those who are in power, they should talk about what they have been doing all these years. Mindless populism, whom they are blaming or accusing, that is number one. Number two, when you discuss subsidy, are you prepared to discuss the rate of profit which is given to the corporate houses, big business houses? What is the profit they are making every passing year and how they can make such a profit? What is the corporate tax in India? What is the concessions, tax exemptions given to corporate sector in India? Are they prepared to discuss whether Congress or BJP? And while you discuss subsidy, I once again insist, subsidy is not a philanthropy shown by Congress party or BJP which are in power, but it is a compensation. You have been denying the real wages to the toiling people, and you have been denying their fair due share in countries.
Mr. Raja, would you agree that rationalization is important? Would you agree that at least rationalizing these schemes?
What is the rationalization? Yes,
so they should continue as they are, whether we can afford them or not.
I am for rationalization. You tax the rich. Don't ask the poor people to tighten their
No. This
belts,
is not rationalization.
and you ask the corporate houses to open their coffers, keep the coffers for a big profit.
Okay.
No, what do you mean by rationalization?
Okay, I'll give you an example again.
One second.
What is this Tendulkar line or Rangarajan line of poverty? It is nothing but mockery of poor people. And what is this poverty line? I would like to ask.
We were having
what
that
is
debate
the per
the other
capita spending or per capita consumption in India?
No, those
Can
poverty
they live
numbers
with
are
43
actually,
rupees
they are, I agree with you, rather absurd.
Per day.
But Siddharth Birla, you can see that this debate about subsidies, about mindless populism, as Arun Jaitley called it, it's something that does, stir up a lot of debate in this country. At that time, industry was very clear. A lot of industry voices said that no, we can't afford a food bill. It's just too high. It's a subsidy that we cannot afford. And yet, in this country, you do know that there are millions of people who go hungry. So morally, it was a very difficult argument to hold down. When they talk about rationalizing all of this, then what do you think that means?
Okay, can I take half a step back, because I've heard a lot of, with all due humility to Mr. Raja, we've heard a lot of contempt about the corporate sector, and I think it is not fair on the corporate sector. Certainly, if any corporate sector is found to be misbehaving or doing wrong things, we do not stand in support. But to say that a corporate sector is evil and effectively evil, I'm using my word, I think it's completely wrong.
I'm not saying that. No. I'm not saying that.
Sir, I'm not arguing with you.
Say that.
Sir, I'm not arguing with you, but I don't want blame to be laid at the door of the corporate sector just for the sake of laying blame. On the subsidies, Nidhi, if I can quickly come back, I don't think it was ever industry's case or it was business case that subsidies are wrong. Subsidies are needed in the social setup of our country, and particularly the social breakup that we have. It is a very important part of governance. As far as
I can name you a million voices on this program who said India couldn't afford the food security bill, and they opposed it tooth and nail. That's
Madam,
a fact. But that's a different. That is a different story. You may not have been, but there were plenty of people from the corporate world who did oppose it. My question, though, is that do you believe that will be key in this budget to restructure these?
Let me clarify. Let me clarify. On my chair, I also represent a lot of businesses, and therefore I speak with that responsibility, not just for myself. We never opposed the principle. If you decided, it's a political decision whether you want to give support through subsidies. Fair enough. What we were arguing against is that the subsidies were being wrongly targeted, which means that people other than the deserving and the poor were getting benefit of the subsidies. That is where we felt that the bill was ballooning out of proportion. Number two, Mr. Ashwini Kumar himself also sort of acknowledged that yes, maybe the 67% coverage of the food security bill needs to be looked at, because the way we looked at it, we suddenly told the world that 70% of our country is poor, which is not the right thing. So the issue is, let us direct the subsidies to the people who deserve it. Let us take it away from the people who do not deserve it. That has been the business case.
But Siddharth, I never said,
particularly at a point of time.
I have to correct that.
particularly at the point of time.
I never said that we need to reassess the number of poor.
No, sir, you just flagged it. I'm sorry.
Because don't put your words in my mouth. I said some people felt the number was high.
Okay, sir.
Others felt that the number was low. So somewhere the line was drawn, keeping a host of factors into consideration.
All right. Well, I'm going to have to leave it at that.
Certainly. I take it back. I take it back.
All right. Tomorrow is a big day.
I don't think our case.
Tomorrow is a big day. There are many aspects of the budget and what the expectations are that we couldn't talk about tonight. But I'm glad we did talk about this, the subsidies and the social sector schemes, because I know that's something that the Congress really championed, and whether this government is going to do something dramatically different with that is something we'll watch out for tomorrow. Do join us for our budget day coverage. That's all day tomorrow. Vikram Chandra and Shweta Rajpal Kohli will take you through that. We'll see you again on Friday on this program. Goodbye.